Greetings and welcome to Heroes United. I'm Bruce, and we're going to take a look at X-Men, the film that saved the superhero film genre and paved the way for the new age of superhero films.
So start ignition, count to zero. I just wanna be a superhero. With fearless thoughts, emotions swirled, I wanna be the man that saves the world.
X-Men is a superhero film that was released in July 14th, 2000. Directed by Bryan, it features an ensemble cast starring Hugh Jackman, Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen, Halle Berry, Famke Janssen, James Marsden, Anna Paquin, and Rebecca Romijn. X-Men is a unique film not only because of it pioneering a new era of superhero films, but because it sets up a long line of sequels, prequels, and spin-offs that have been going strong for the past 18 years at the point of this video's release. At the time when this film hit the theaters, the superhero film genre was on its last leg due to the colossal failure of Batman and Robin. Superhero films were treated as a joke and constantly parodied after Joel Schumacher ran the Batman franchise into the ground, with most films before that point either being Batman 89 clones or overlooked gems that failed to gain any traction. While Blade was a step in the right direction in 1998, X-Men single-handedly saved the credibility of the franchise by showing that you can still have serious and in-depth stories that come from comic books. While Tim Burton's Batman proved that you could have a mature and competent film that is adapted from a comic book franchise, Bryan Singer's X-Men went above and beyond to show that there are other properties that can shine if given a chance. It's certainly not an easy task to adapt a comic book series onto the big screen, especially with a cast as colorful as the X-Men. Bryan Singer manages to transition most of this source material into the film with a solid understanding of what the comics and the political messages stood for, relating to fighting prejudice and finding acceptance in a world where people fear and hate what they don't understand. I really do enjoy the majority of the casting in this film, especially with Hugh Jackman, Patrick Stewart, and Ian McKellen's performances being the highlight of this movie.
Sabretooth. Storm. What do they call you? Wheels?
Hugh Jackman is still iconic as Wolverine, and it's hard to imagine anyone else being able to take up the legacy that he cemented with such a memorable and layered performance. While Jackman certainly isn't 5'2" like Logan in the comics, he makes up for it with his mannerisms and appearance being 100% accurate to his comic book counterpart, while making the role his own. Hugh Jackman is up there with Christopher Reeve's Superman and Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man as some of the best casting in all superhero films. Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen are just as spot on as Professor X and Magneto. Their dynamic is handled perfectly, always with respect and affection for each other, even when they are heated adversaries. Their struggle is as old as time, and both actors are so convincing that you don't really need to see a debate on the screen for the audience to understand both sides. You can just tell how they feel just by their expressions alone. The film's strongest parts usually come down to the relationships between the characters, namely Logan and Rogue. Their bond is the backbone to the film and its plot, and really works due to how well Logan and Rogue's powers parallel each other. Logan has his healing factor, while Rogue's ability to absorb other mutants' powers are lethal. Both are outsiders that yearn for belonging and acceptance, and find what they've looked for in each other. They serve as the eyes in for the audience, and help follow along with the plot and introducing other characters. The film creates a believable atmosphere that feels real and organic, with the environment being built on realism and seriousness. The political landscape of the world in this film is filled with tension, with the threat of war looming at any minute. While this film reinvented the wheel for the superhero film genre, it still has a fair share of issues. The pacing for this film is very choppy, and it is a lot to take in during your first viewing. This isn't because the film is deeply layered or has things you might catch on in later viewings. It's just a bumpy ride that tends to jam in exposition and has no real build-up for the climax, making it hard to watch on multiple viewings. While Bryan Singer is a talented director when it comes to character relationships and world building, directing action scenes isn't really his strongest field. The action scenes in X-Men are a bit clumsy and dull, and doesn't really hold up to films around the time such as The Matrix or Blade. Some of the dialogue in the film also feels a bit forced in certain scenes, and some lines are downright cheesy.
Do you know what happens to a toad when it's struck by lightning? The same thing that happens to everything else.
Despite most of the casting choices being pretty spot on, the only one I was never really a fan of was Halle Berry being casted for Storm. She isn't given much to do in this movie, and her accent changing to every scene doesn't exactly help her screen presence either.
At least I've chosen a side.
Her comic book counterpart is a very strong and charismatic figure, and the films never truly capture the essence of her character. She's given more to work with in the sequel, but that's pretty much the most development she'll get in these films. Most of the fans have complained about the black leather suits as well. It's still not something I'm a big fan of, but I understand that the X-Men in this film treat themselves as a covert squad, and that it is very difficult to transition every element of the source material to the big screen. It's just the suits look very drab and they lack any identity that the suits in the comics have. Costumes in the X-Men franchise were always a crucial part of any character's identity and what they stood for. They're always vibrant and bold. And if the uniforms have to be jet black leather, then at least differentiate the uniforms so that they all don't look the same. While a lot of the relationships work in this film, there are some that still feel very empty, namely Scott and Jean and Logan. While the love triangle between Jean, Scott, and Logan has been a major staple in the X-Men comic series for many years, it just doesn't fit that very well into this film in later installments.
I'll see you boys later.
Logan's feelings towards Jean borders on downright infatuation rather than love, namely due to the fact that they barely know each other in this film, and don't have any real profound moments that would justify setting up a romance between the two. While Cyclops and Jean are in a relationship in this film, it doesn't explain if they're married or not, and the two hardly speak to each other, despite being in a lot of scenes together. The unexplained rivalry between Scott and Logan is very left field as well, despite their banter being very accurate to their relationship in the comics.
Oh, and Logan, stay away from my girl.
The love triangle kind of falls flat in this film, and only really exists due to it being in the comics. Speaking of Cyclops, he is criminally underused in this film. James Marsden is a wonderful casting choice for the role, don't get me wrong, but it just seems that the writers and singer didn't really know what to do with him or how to use him properly, and pretty much made him second fiddle to Wolverine for his trilogy. He only serves as Professor X's right-hand man and is a rival to Logan for Jean's affections. On top of that, he's largely incompetent and is usually the first to go down in a fight without being able to use any of his abilities that he has in the comics that make him such a strong and iconic leader that he's very famous for. If I could describe X-Men in one word, I would say pilot. This film feels like a dress rehearsal, with the real story being told in the sequel where its setups will have a huge payoff. Without this film, though, there wouldn't be The Dark Knight or Iron Man, and the big superhero film boom that we live in today, or at least when this video was posted, wouldn't exist. It's a solid film and a taste test for what is to come in its next chapter, and for that, I give X-Men a solid 3 out of 4. Thank you very much for tuning in. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and have a wonderful day.